Hello everyone, it's Fabian from GFI. Welcome back to my channel. And for those of you that are new here, please, this is the moment to hit the subscribe button, and you may also want to click on that little bell icon. And I promise you're not going to miss any more of my future videos. Right, let's get started. Today it's time to get back to the transfer review series that I've recently started with a video on Bayern Munich's transfer activity. Today we're going to talk about the runners-up Borussia Dortmund's transfer activity over the summer, and as a little bit of a warning ahead, some of my friends were quite critical of me because when I shared my views with them, they said that I was a little bit too critical of Borussia Dortmund in their opinion. They're very passionate Borussia Dortmund supporters. So if you're a Dortmund supporter, you might find this a little bit too critical, but that's the whole point of my channel. I tell you exactly what I think. I'll try to reason it. I'll try to give you my explanations. But as long as we stay in certain boundaries of friendly communication, then of course I'm inviting you to share your views in the comments below. And I'm looking forward to read them all, and I'll respond to them if I have something to say to it. So yeah, let me know what you think about it as always. And we're gonna get into it right now. This is the final table of the 22-23 Bundesliga season, and as we can all see, Bayern won their 11th consecutive championship season. Borussia Dortmund were runners-up, but unlike all the seasons before, it's been phenomenally close this time, with Bayern and Dortmund both finishing on 71 points. And Dortmund losing out on the championship on goal difference. What you cannot see from this table, of course, is that Dortmund was actually in pole position before the final match day. They have more points, but they blew it because they only managed to draw while Bayern managed to win relatively late on. Dortmund playing Mainz, not getting above a draw versus Mainz, whereas Bayern managed a late 2-1 victory thanks to a Musiala goal against Cologne, and thereby clinching their 11th title. Now this was of course the closest Dortmund had come to win the championship in many years. I think everything was prepared, the beer was chilled, the course for the bus parade laid out, the t-shirts printed, the appointments for the town hall balcony celebration made. Everything was prepared in Dortmund, but it wasn't to be. And I think Bayern was probably surprised themselves to win this championship. I don't think they expected that. So it was, of course, a big party for the Bayern fans. Utter disappointment and heartbreak for Dortmund, and the scenes, of course, are still very vivid in my memories. Lots of tears. Their coach Edin Terzic was having a tough time keeping his voice, speaking to the fans. And on the press conference after the match, he was already had gotten so far as to say that his idea was they would bounce back. He felt sorry. He apologized to the fans that he couldn't deliver the championship this year, but he said it was just postponed. He'll deliver it later. And then their president, Hans-Joachim Watzke, said later on that when asked whether Dortmund would make a complete rebuild over the summer, he said that they would not do that. They played a very, very good second half of the season, which is true. Therefore he sort of interpreted it as a signal that the core of the team was actually good, and they would just make some improvements here and there to make the team even a little bit better and to give it another go. Now, from those statements, I don't know how you interpreted those statements. I'm sure, especially the Dortmund fans, you will have followed that closely. But for me, that I basically got two messages here. Number one, we're certainly going to try again to win the championship. I got that from both Watzke, Terzic, and I think Sebastian Kehl also said some things. So we're going to try again to win the championship, bring you the championship. And secondly, we've been very close. We've played a very good second half. And because we were so close, we're just going to make some certain improvements, but not a complete revamp of the team. That's how I interpreted those statements. That's how I got it. And I assume from reading reactions on social media and so on, I assume that's what most of the Dortmund fans, understood. That's how they interpreted that. So as a Dortmund fan, you'd expect some improvements now. And I think there's already one big mistake here. And I'm going to show you why I think that's the case. Now, both Watzke and Terzic said, well, look, we've been very, very close. Which they have. I mean, you can't argue with that. Look here, 71 points. True, very close. But here's the interesting thing. Let's take a look at all these years before. So this is 22-23. Now we're looking at 21-22, 77 points. Also runners up Dortmund, but you see there's a gap of 8 points. So 77 points. 78 points. And I can go on here. 82 points. 78. Now we're at 17-18 season. 84 points. And I can go on here as much as I want. 82 points. 88 points. What I'm trying to show is 79 again. What I'm trying to show here is again is that this is actually, these 71 points is actually the lowest points that the Bundesliga has been won on for the last, 8 years, 10 years? No more, yeah. So, questions must be asked. Has Dortmund been so close because they've been so good, or because in fact Bayern, by their own standards, have had quite a chaotic season? Yes, it was still good enough to win the championship. As I said, I don't think Bayern themselves would have believed that they're going to win this championship this year. They've obviously fired their coach Nagelsmann in the season. Both Salihamidzic and Kahn, their management, had to go as well at the end of the season. So, quite clearly not a good Bayern season at all. Yes, they still managed to win the championship, but really, it's not been a good Bayern season. In fact, look, Dortmund 71 points. We're now going to go back a few seasons, and I'm showing you 69. I'm going to show you, look, 76. So in the 18-19 season, just a few years ago, Dortmund actually weren't champions but had 5 points more. And I think we can go further back and you'll see that Dortmund, there were even seasons where Dortmund had even more points and didn't. Look here, 78. That's in the 15-16 season, Dortmund had 78 points. That's 2 wins and 1 draw, 7 points more than they had last season. And yet, still they didn't make it and win the championship. So what I'm trying to say here is Dortmund, unlike Watzke implies with his statements, wasn't so close because they played such great football. No, they were so close because Bayern had, again, by their own standards, an off season. By far the worst Bayern season in more than 10 years. Statistically. I mean, the figures don't lie. So, that year really, last season, was Dortmund's chance to win it. And historically, given the financial firepower Bayern has, and if you watch my last video on Bayern's transfer season, you can see that they've made certainly some use of that. I don't think we can expect that Bayern will have such a weak season again. So this really was Dortmund's chance. Also because if you look below here, Leipzig not utilizing their full potential, not really threatening up here. And then 4th and 5th position, Union Berlin and Freiburg, who on their own standards have done exceptionally well. But again, we could have expected a team like Leverkusen or Wolfsburg up there, who had both some very good second halves, which brought them up here, but had a terrifyingly bad start to the last year's season. So that's why they made their way up, but couldn't challenge right up at the top here. But what I'm trying to say is what we can expect next year, this year, a much better Bayern team, a much better Bayern season, and probably one of these teams here, maybe Leverkusen or Wolfsburg, maybe one of the other teams here will have a better season again and might also challenge up here. So really, it's not going to get easier for Dortmund. It will be probably much harder this season. And that, of course, changes everything, because that means it won't be enough to just improve the team a little bit. To be challenging for the championship again this year, in my opinion, it's not enough to do that. They will actually have to improve the team significantly. So I think this is the sort of first thing that makes me wonder what this Dortmund team will be capable of when I listen to these statements. So I think the next step, what we're going to do is look whether they have at least made the team a little bit better, or if maybe the team actually hasn't improved at all. We'll see. Some things we can see at first glance. First of all, currently 28 players in the squad. That's obviously quite a bit more compared to Bayern Munich with 23 players, which is a little bit of on the thin end. Then we have a market value here displayed at 467 million euros. Now, of course, these figures are always a little bit tentative, but at around half the market value of the Bayern Munich squad at 23 players, that gives you a little bit of the foundations when we talk about the challenge for the next championship, right? Now we look into the squad, and I think we start with the relatively easy ones. So Rafael Guerreiro departed on a free transfer to Bayern Munich. He's a 29-year-old left back, just 170 tall, very technical player. And then Borussia Dortmund got Rami Benzebaini, left back, 28 years old. That's probably as much a like-for-like replacement as you'll probably see. Of course, players are a bit different. Benzebaini, 187 meters tall, a lot more physical, faster as well. Hasn't got the technical ability that Guerreiro has. Different kind of player, but then on the position-wise, it's as I said, as like-for-like as it gets. Then, of course, we have some departures we can quickly mention. We have Nico Schulz, who hasn't played a role there for the last seasons, really. He's just 30 years old. That's obviously an age where some players still have a lot of football in. Dortmund tried to get rid of him for some time now, but obviously there were no takers, so the contract just expired now. Hasn't played a role for Dortmund for a longer time now. Paslak gone on a free transfer to Bochum and is also playing frequently. Modest, 35, that was a departure to be expected. He was obviously drafted in at short notice when Sébastien Haller, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, fell ill with his tumor surgery, and they needed at short notice some more a backup up front, which Modest couldn't really supply, maybe due to his age and deteriorating form, but it was clear that after the season he would depart, so no surprise here. Also went on a free transfer. Modahoud had been surplus to requirements for longer times. He's moving to Brighton on a free transfer. So no real big surprises here. Some loan deals Knauf moving for 5 million euros to Frankfurt, and then Torgan Azad, who is also surplus to requirements, moving for 4 million euros back to his home country, Belgium. Now, those I think are the players we don't need to focus on so much. The player we do need to focus on, of course, is this one here. Jude Bellingham, just 20 years old, joined Dortmund in 2020 for the 2021 season from Birmingham City for 30 million euros, and who's now departed for more than 100 million euros to Real Madrid. Now, we've spent a great amount of time on talking Harry Kane being the biggest addition to the Bundesliga this year, so Bellingham is certainly the biggest departure from the Bundesliga, and despite that, no real surprise, no protest by the fans, because Bellingham really was just part of a model that Borussia Dortmund has very successfully played out over the last seasons. So Dortmund has successfully established itself as a sort of switchboard club for Europe's hottest talent with a sort of proven track record that want to move to the very top but want to make a step in between. Now you could argue that Sancho was the same kind of player, joining for little money and then making the move to Man United, although that, as you may have noticed, hasn't quite worked out. But he had a great couple of great seasons. Dortmund, multiplying his market value and then leaving for a great club. Then of course we had Erling Haaland, who already when he joined, everyone knew if he was just near the level that everyone expected him to be, then he would just be there for 2 or 3 seasons, be very successful, but also leave with a great gain in market value, which he did. And then of course Bellingham was sort of the next in a row. Exactly the same kind of player. Everyone knew when they signed him that if he was just close to what people suggested Bellingham could do in the future, he would obviously do very well, and then leave again and after a couple of seasons and bring the club also enormous financial gains. And that has of course worked out. So nobody was angry with Bellingham leaving, because that was always part sort of the concept. Nobody expected Bellingham to be there for the next 10 years. And to be honest, Bellingham completely over-delivered on that front. I mean, more than tripled his market value, or the investment in Bellingham, and I mean, there's very good reasons for such a model, because if you look back, there have been many cases and examples of sort of big talents making that step to one of the huge super clubs instantly and failing badly, and sometimes never really getting back on track. So I think there really is a case, or there's a good case for players making such a move. When they come from a club like Birmingham, which was at the time, I don't actually know where they play right now, but at the time they were second in the Championship, so that's the second British, second English league. So there really was a case for players when they come from a kind of second league club to make a step in between. And I think Dortmund has really established itself as a club offering that. Obviously, the ability to offer Champions League football, huge stadium, 90,000 plus spectators, great fan base, fan culture, and great history. So I think the package really is very good, and of course, if you look at Bellingham's performance, you can see why he's moved to Real Madrid. So Bellingham with 132 games for Dortmund, 24 goals, 25 assists. and that of course you have to take into account that he's a central midfielder and not a number 9 striker. Those are obviously very impressive figures, and I think it's not just the assists or the goals. It's also the dynamic and the positivity, the energy he brought to Dortmund's game. I think would go as far as to say that Bellingham was really Dortmund's difference players. He could make a difference in a tight game, and if you look at how he's started at Real Madrid already, he's been storming out of the gates there, and I don't think it's surprising. It was kind of obvious that he's already scored in 7 games for Madrid. He scored already 6 goals and 2 assists, so absolutely no surprise from my point of view that he would make it there. That's exactly, I think that's been exactly the whole idea of signing Bellingham for Madrid, and I think from a Dortmund point of view it was always clear that it would work out this way. Now, that said, and having established Bellingham, of course, a big loss. So the question, of course, from a Dortmund point of view is, how do they fill the gap? I mean, who basically, having talked through this model that Dortmund has employed over the previous years quite successfully, question, of course, is who of the signings is the next Bellingham? Who is the next Haaland, the next Sancho, the next guy that they've bought and that in 3 years' time or 2 years' time will again bring in the big money for the club? Well, if we look at this, we basically see 3 signings here, and we're going to make it quick. It's not these 2 guys here. Sabitzer joined from Bayern Munich. He is a central midfielder, so he's basically playing in the Bellingham region. But of course, being 29 years old, he's completely different kind of player. I personally like Sabitzer a lot. I think whenever he's coming onto the pitch, he's bringing something. He's an active pole. He's bringing some dynamic to the game. I like watching him play, but he's obviously been one of the players. He came to the light when emerging from this young RB Leipzig squad, got then snapped up by Bayern, but has the problem that some of the players joining Bayern have always been a very good Bundesliga player, but to be a regular Bayern starter, of course, you need to be even better than that. So he was just used as a substitute occasionally, which of course wasn't what he wanted. And then he actually was loaned out to Manchester United last season, where he actually made some good games, really. And I think even the Man United fans liked him. But given Manchester United has also got some financial restraints, they were never going to spend 19 million on him. And instead went to Dortmund, which I think from Sabitzer's point of view is a good move. He might get more playing time there, and I think at the same time might complement the squad nicely. But of course, at 29, it's not that we can expect anything of the unexpected in the next season. So he's certainly not the guy to replace Bellingham. Similar things can be said about Niklas Füllkrug. Dortmund signed Füllkrug one day before the transfer window shut on a Thursday. It looked for a long time that he might stay at Werder Bremen, and only at the end of the transfer window did we kind of learn that Werder always had to sell him. We'll talk about more when we do the Werder Bremen transfer review. That's going to be an exciting episode, I can tell you that already. Now, Füllkrug, obviously, great character. I think the only player in that Germany team during the Qatar World Cup that people enjoyed watching. There's some in this pretty scary documentary, All or Nothing, which you can watch on Amazon. You can see him having a great pep talk to the team, trying to get them going. He obviously scored some nice goals. He was a kind of, in my opinion, the only player really worth watching, the only one who really tried, the only one who delivered in this otherwise really sad episode of the German national team. Now, he obviously had a great impact at Werder Bremen, not just as a player, but also as a person. As I said, a classic character guy. Not many of these of this type left in professional football nowadays. Obviously, a kind of late bloomer, now 30 years old. Went down with Bremen. Didn't move, but stayed at Bremen and had a significant contribution to bringing them up into the first league again. But my general perception was that most of the Bremen fans understood, or were kind of saying, understood his move to Dortmund, saying, look, we need the money, and basically you have deserved a chance at Champions League football at 30, He was actually the best, together with Christopher Nkunku, who went from Leipzig to Chelsea and is, I think, still injured this season. He was joint top scorer at 15 goals. Of course, 15 goals, you could argue there have been higher top scorer marks, but still, that's something. But of course, it's questionable whether he's clearly completely different type to Bellingham. He's a box striker, classic box striker. He's not very fast. But he certainly knows where the goal is and how to put it in there. So I think at 13 million euros, it's Dortmund are having a punt basically for that kind of money. Is taking chances. I think Füllkrug, it's obviously questionable whether he'll score 15 goals again in the Bundesliga season, and if at all he fits in at Dortmund. But then at 13 million plus add-ons, I think it's from a Dortmund point of view, it's a risk worth taking. But of course, we don't know how much of top football is left in him. So he clearly isn't the Bellingham either. So the only player left here is Felix Metscher, signed from VfL Wolfsburg. Now, we've got, first of all, who is he? He's 190 tall. He's just 22 years old, and he's also a central midfielder. So looks to me that at least position-wise and age-wise, he's sort of the player that Dortmund intend to bring in to sort of replace Bellingham. But I think that's sort of where the similarities end, because watching his statistics so far, I am struggling to see how that's supposed to run. So he's played 50 games for Wolfsburg, scored 3 goals, 7 assists. He's obviously been trained at the Manchester City Academy, where his stats look a lot more impressive. 47 games, 15 goals, 5 assists. That's obviously great statistics. But then his time at Wolfsburg, sort of the statistics don't look as impressive as they have the years before. Funny thing here is, of course, a couple of games or matches played. At 6 Bundesliga games played so far, 328 minutes. That's obviously less than 60 minutes per game. So he clearly hasn't played all the matches so far. Same goes for also in the recent. Looking at his appearances so far, you can see that he has barely ever played the full time, all the matches, and I'm struggling, and I'm sorry to say that I am struggling to see how he's gonna be the next Bellingham. They've paid 30 million euros for him. That's more or less the money they paid for Bellingham 3 years ago. But I can't see him fetching more than 90 or 100 million or even more in 2 or 3 years' time. I haven't got enough fantasy, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I just can't see it. Again, you see market value 15 million. That's also quite a gulf here. Of course, again, these have to be seen with some caution. But still, I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised when he was signed. I watched the Dortmund fan forums, the social media, and there were lots of question marks. Of course, a lot of Dortmund fans said, well, give him a chance, which of course they will do. But he hasn't been, I would say, an instant hit after 6 Bundesliga games. But I'm just failing to see him filling the big boots sort of left by Bellingham, the big footsteps, sorry. I don't think he has the big boots for that. And you just wonder whether that was a little bit of a sort of desperation buy here from Dortmund. I'm not sure. Apparently they were in close talks to sign Alvarez from, I think it was Ajax. And apparently the player wanted to join Dortmund, but at some point Dortmund got cold feet because the price moved more towards the 40 million euro mark, which Dortmund apparently didn't want to spend. Well, then they ended up with Mecha. So again, we will have to see. Maybe something will happen that I cannot imagine, and that's my mistake. And he will turn out to be the great signing, and he will sort of continue this chain of Sancho, Haaland, Bellingham, and maybe next one is Mecha. But right now I am struggling to see that, which of course means, coming back to the overall squad, if he's not an adequate replacement, despite the other two guys who I think just barely adequate to sort of replace what's left here on the other side, which means that so far I cannot see a big improvement. And of course, which means that the players that were already there, the core team that Watzke talked about, will need to up their game in a way and improve. And when I look at the sort of core team, then I see players like Süle, who's now 28, and then still sort of, you think that with a few kilos less he would probably do a lot better, which was already said during his time at Bayern. Then you have Mats Hummels, who's now 34, who is having quite a good season so far, arguably good performances so far, but of course at 34, and you wonder how he'll go through the long run of the season. And then you have Meunier, 32. You have Emre Can, who is now captain, but is struggling to fill that role, and he's also 29 already. So at the moment, it looks a little bit like the old core team will have to do it, but it is questionable, I think, how they are going to do it. You have Marco Reus, who's looks a bit liberated after he's given the captain's armband to Can, but he's also already 34, so he's not the future. That's clear. So all in all, I don't think it's a terrible team, but I don't think it's improved at all. I think the team is rather a little bit weaker than it has been last season, because that Bellingham loss is huge. That they haven't been able to fill that gap, in my opinion. The players they have come in are either in reinforcements, but not a Bellingham replacement. And they've brought in mainly senior players that add to the already quite senior squad, that will not get younger. And I think what we see in the Bundesliga is a trend to have really fast wingers, really fast and athletic forwards. I see that at Leverkusen, at Leipzig, at Bayern. And I do wonder, looking at this defense here, how they are going to deal with that, especially against the top teams. So looking at the transfer activity, I think Watzke basically saying, and I said this at the start, Watzke said that we're very close. We make small, light improvements. And I would say they're not very close. They're actually quite far away, at least for this season. Last season was their big chance to win the championship, because Bayern had an off season. Leverkusen or Wolfsburg were not in a condition to challenge for the title. So it was really Bayern Dortmund, and Bayern was really weak, which meant Dortmund was very close. But they should be aware of the fact that this year it'll probably be much harder. So in order to challenge again for that, they would not just need to improve a little, they would need to improve a lot. And I think they haven't improved at all. I think the squad is weaker than it was last season because they've lost Bellingham. They haven't been able to replace him. They've gotten some decent senior players, but their core team is also getting quite senior, and I just cannot see them challenge for the titles. I think they might settle somewhere in the Europa League places, but I just think they're nowhere near Bayern, Leverkusen and Leipzig. I think those three definitely be better over the course of the season than Dortmund, and maybe one or two other of the teams out there as well. So it's going to be a tough season for Dortmund, and I can't see them challenge for the title. That's my review on Dortmund. And of course, we'll continue with Leipzig in my next episode, and I hope you're going to be watching again. For the moment, it's thanks for watching. As always, drop your comments and let me know what you think about that, and I look forward to hear from you. See you in the next video. Goodbye.